Nintendo's Super Punch-Out was released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo system, and at first appearance, you would think it's a port of the arcade title by the same name. But it's not truly a port. There are some similarities, some similar characters, but it's more or less its own kind of game. Now, the Super Nintendo version allowed you to save your game, which was fantastic. And you got to put your name in and save a bunch of different slots, maybe 8 or 10 of them. And you get to configure your joystick or joypad, which was a phenomenal feature. And it was kind of a new thing at the time. Now, like I said, it's not an exact replica of the arcade games Punch-Out and Super Punch-Out, which is a shame because they were both awesome games. But it's kind of close, and it has a lot of similar features and familiar characters, and it looks a whole lot better than the Nintendo NES version Punch-Out or Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Now let's talk about gameplay for a moment. In the arcade versions of Punch-Out and Super Punch-Out specifically, you had 3 buttons and a joystick. Your buttons were left punch, right punch, and your big giant Super Punch button. And your joystick was to dodge punches and control your blocking. In the Super Punch-Out arcade, you could pull directly straight up on the joystick, which is almost the opposite of like a thumbstick click button on the modern game controllers. And that would allow you to duck. And it was a great feature, and it was required to beat some of the characters. And now, since there's no analog stick or anything like that on the Super Nintendo controller, that feature couldn't be utilized, but they did allow the ducking by pushing down on the D-pad. So it was the same function, just a different button input style. But since you're using down on the D-pad to duck, they have to do something about your blocking your midsection, which in the arcade was you accomplish by pushing down on the joystick. So they set it to the game maker set the default mode where you're not pressing anything on the gamepad to blocking your midsection, which changes the gameplay dramatically. So by default, just standing there, you're blocking your midsection. To block your head, you simply press up on the D-pad. So if you want to block your midsection, just don't do anything. Here's Canadian Bear Hugger. He's a character right from the Super Punch-Out arcade game, and he is the first character you have to actually duck to avoid a special punch he does, and that's a special punch there. Now, the other thing I noticed is there's some pretty horrible hit detection in this game by your enemies, which makes dodging punches that don't require ducking extremely easy. If you can dodge a punch by going left or right, you got a lot of leeway in there. I found myself dodging accidentally extremely early when an opponent faked a punch, and I was still safe, you know, seconds later when I thought for sure I would have been hit.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Now, the graphics for the Super Nintendo version are pretty good. They're a pretty close replica to the arcade. The arcade's a little crisper. But in general, everything's looking pretty clean and nice. Your main character, though, is quite different from the arcade. In the arcade, you had a green wire-framed character you could see through. And he had green hair. And in this, they changed it to, I don't know if you're Little Mac or what, still from the original Nintendo Punch-Out. You might be, I'm not positive, though. I don't have the manual for this game to tell me. But you're definitely not the green wireframe guy. They just opted to make you sort of transparent instead of a wireframe. Here's the second character from the arcade games, at least from the original Punch-Out arcade. I don't know if he was in Super Punch-Out also. It's Piston Hurricane. And if you remember the original Nintendo NES Punch-Out, they changed that character to Piston Honda and made him Asian. I don't know why they did that, but they changed him back to Piston Hurricane, and for the Super Nintendo version.
cake.
Oh, and you see that rest equals 4 at the bottom right-hand side of the screen? That's the number of continues you have. Why they couldn't call it continues, who knows, but they decided to call it rest for some odd reason. And the Bald Bull joins us from the NES versions of Punch-Out! The Bald Bull, I don't believe, was in the arcade versions. But he's a pretty good character. He was one of my favorites from Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! So it's good to see him back. Although he looks not as big as he does in the NES version. Looks kind of like he shrank a little bit. And he still does his bull charge. And you beat that the same way you did in the original Punch-Out!, which is to have a well-timed body blow while he's charging you. And the Bald Bull was the first character that gave me a little trouble in this game. The other characters were pretty easy up until this point. But the Bald Bull, it's a little harder, it seems, to time the punch while he's doing his bull charge. For whatever reason. It might be because of the, frankly, what I felt was poor hit detection in this game. And I've completed one of the 3 circuits in the game, which is kind of cool, but I kind of missed the old training modes in between circuits in the NES version, where you kind of jog around with your trainer in the pink running suit. Here we see a totally new character, Bob Charlie, which I guess is supposed to be Bob Marley. And this character, it starts to get a little hairy with this character. And I don't mean in skill level. I mean in offensive-ness and political correctness, I guess. There's something really odd that happens when you fight him. Like, while you're fighting all the characters, people in your corner shout out little advice and it pops up on the screen in like a thought bubble, kind of speech bubble thing. And they do the same to the opponents, the people in the opponent's corner, which gives you a little heads up on what kind of special move they might do. But in this character, it borders on racist. And I'll show you that just in a second when it comes up.
1, 2, 3. Fight!
Here we go. He's preparing to do his special move, and the people in his corner are shouting something. Can we see what they're shouting? There it is. Bob, time to shuck and jive. I don't know about that one, but it's not overtly racist, but it's pretty darn close to it. I don't know. I guess there weren't many people proofreading this stuff or double-checking for cultural sensitivity issues. But I'll bet you one thing, that whoever was programming the speech bubbles probably wasn't African American. But racist programming aside, Bob Charlie was a fairly tough opponent, and you can see I used a couple of continues to get past him, which I, of course, edited out so I look like a stellar Super Nintendo player. And now we have Dragon Chan, which was from the arcade Super Punch-Out! Game. And he looks and acts the same as the arcade version, which is nice to see. He's a pretty tough opponent in the arcade. Most of the time, Dragon Chan was the guy that finished me off and used up all my quarters. And the Super Nintendo version of the game is no different. He kicked my ass pretty good here. So all in all, Super Punch-Out's a pretty fun game to play. I'd definitely pick it up. It's got pretty high marks, and the save feature is a definite nice bonus. I'm Dommy from Classic Games Revisited, and until next time, you can join us on ClassicGamesRevisited.com.